Wife divorced poor husband to marry his best friend. But what she never saw coming was the elegant move that turned her betrayal into her own destruction. Nathan Cole, a hardworking man who once believed love was stronger than money, watched the woman he built his world around walk away for the man he trusted most. She thought she was upgrading her life, trading loyalty for luxury, friendship for fortune. But what happens when the poor husband she abandoned turns out to be 10 steps ahead of them both? What kind of man smiles when his wife betrays him? And what elegant move could leave a cheating wife and her new husband completely shattered? The morning light crept through the blinds of the modest Atlanta apartment, catching the edge of Nathan Cole's laptop screen as he checked the balance on their joint account. His thumb froze mid-scroll. Another $2,800 gone. Property maintenance, the line read. Again. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, refreshed the page. The same deduction appeared for the last 5 months. Nathan wasn't paranoid, he was precise. Numbers were his language. But this number, this monthly leak, whispered something he hadn't wanted to hear. In the kitchen, Lydia hummed softly, pouring almond milk into her coffee, wearing the satin robe he'd bought her for their anniversary. The one she'd said looked too cheap for Instagram. Nathan closed the laptop, watching her silhouette move in the light, graceful, confident, unaware that something inside him had just shifted. "Babe," he said casually, forcing a smile, "who's getting all this maintenance money?" She didn't turn. "Oh, that," she said, her tone light. "Just some upkeep for Mom's condo. You know how the management always adds hidden fees?" Nathan nodded slowly. "Right. Hidden fees." When she turned to kiss him goodbye, he caught the faint scent of a cologne he didn't wear. Dylan's cologne. Expensive, sharp, arrogant. The kind you could smell across a boardroom. His best friend's scent. The day moved like glass. Nathan went to work, numbers blurring on the screen. He'd spent 10 years building stability. Not wealth, not luxury, just peace. He thought love could outlast ambition. But that morning, for the first time, he realized peace could make you blind. That night, as Lydia scrolled through her phone in bed, smiling at messages she pretended were from Ava, her yoga instructor, Nathan stared at the ceiling. The silence between them felt heavier than any argument. He reached for his phone, opened a private browser and typed, "Private Investigator Atlanta, Discreet Services." The man he called Logan Pierce had a voice that sounded like old leather and experience. "You sure you want to know?" Logan asked. "Some truths don't go back in the box once they're out?" "I'm sure," Nathan said. By the end of that week, Logan's camera lens had seen everything Nathan's love had refused to. Photos. Lydia stepping out of Dylan's Range Rover. Lydia entering a Buckhead apartment registered under D. Shaw Real Estate. Lydia unlocking the door like she lived there. When Nathan opened the file, something in him didn't break. It froze. Every dinner with Dylan, every football game, every drink at the bar replayed in his head like a movie where he'd been the punchline. He didn't confront her, not yet. He waited. Calculated. Every night he memorized her lies. Every morning he planned his silence. Until one evening, Lydia came home glowing, literally glowing. "I filed the papers," she said, setting the divorce documents on the table like a birthday gift. "Nathan, this isn't working. You deserve someone more your pace. You know Dylan offered to help me find an apartment until the settlement clears?" He smiled faintly, his voice calm. Of course he did. That night, after she fell asleep, Nathan sat by the window, watching the city lights shimmer. Atlanta looked so alive from a distance. Cars moving, people laughing, deals closing. But beneath it, every light hid a lie. He picked up his phone again, typed one message to Logan. "Find out who's paying for that apartment. And check something else for me. DNA testing services." He pressed send, exhaled, and whispered into the silence. "You think you won, but I'm not done playing yet." 3 days later, the air in Nathan's office felt heavier than usual. His phone buzzed twice, a text from Logan Pierce. "I've got everything. You'll want to sit down." By the time Logan arrived, Nathan had already locked the door and drawn the blinds. Logan dropped a thick envelope on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Inside were photographs, receipts, and DNA test results sealed in a white envelope. "She's been taking money from your joint account every month," Logan said quietly, sliding the papers forward. "Transfers marked as condo maintenance, straight into Dylan Shaw's apartment account." Nathan didn't speak. He flipped the photos slowly, each one colder than the last. Lydia in sunglasses stepping out of Dylan's Range Rover, the same car Dylan had once used to drive Nathan to his job interviews years ago. Another photo, Lydia laughing on the balcony in a silk dress Nathan recognized. He had ironed that dress himself the night of their anniversary. Then Logan's tone changed. "There's something else. You told me to check the kids." Nathan's heart clenched. Logan pushed forward the DNA results. Nathan unfolded the sheet, his hands steady, but his eyes burning as he read, "Probability of paternity, 0.0% for both minors." The room fell silent. Outside, Atlanta traffic hummed like a cruel soundtrack to a moment that would never leave him. For a long time, Nathan said nothing. He just stared at the wall, breathing through the ache in his chest. Logan stood slowly. "You want me to keep digging?" Nathan finally looked up, voice quiet but sharp. "No, you've done enough. Now it's my turn." That night he drove through the city, past the restaurant where Lydia and Dylan had first met him for dinner years ago, past the cafe where Dylan had helped him write his first resume, past everything that used to mean loyalty. It all looked the same, but nothing felt real anymore. He parked outside the Buckhead apartment. From the shadows, he watched Lydia and Dylan laughing on the balcony, glasses in hand, living their little fantasy on the ruins of his trust. His fingers tightened around the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. But instead of rage, he felt a strange, chilling calm, the kind of calm that comes when pain transforms into purpose. By midnight, Nathan had made his first move. He logged into his hidden business account, the one he'd built quietly during years Lydia mocked his small projects. It wasn't small anymore. His fintech startup had just signed its first corporate contract, and the funding was set to multiply. He drafted one email to his co-founder, Clara Reyes. "Accelerate our registration transfer. New holding name, RC Analytics. Keep my name off the paperwork. Not a word to anyone, especially not Lydia." Then another message to Logan. "Follow Dylan's company. I want every legal weakness, every debt, every silent partner." The following morning, Lydia was gone before sunrise, leaving a note on the counter that read, "Don't make this harder than it is, Nathan. You'll be fine. You always survive." He looked at the handwriting that once made him believe in love and smiled faintly. "You're right," he whispered. "I survive, but not how you think." That same afternoon, Dylan's company received an email from a potential investor, a sophisticated tech firm offering partnership opportunities. Dylan, unaware that the proposal was Nathan's doing under a holding company, excitedly signed the preliminary documents. In that single digital signature, Nathan's first revenge seed was planted. As the sun dipped behind Atlanta's skyline, Nathan stood by his window again. The pain was still there, but it had changed shape. No longer a wound, but a weapon. The game had begun. He whispered to himself, almost smiling, "Let's see how it feels when trust turns into strategy." 2 weeks later, Lydia adjusted her diamond bracelet in the mirror of their new Buckhead penthouse, the one Dylan bragged about buying cash down, though Nathan knew the paperwork better than they did. Outside, Atlanta shimmered in the late spring haze, luxury cars humming down Peachtree Street, skyscrapers catching the light like mirrors built on ego. Lydia's reflection smiled back at her, but her eyes looked restless. Dylan came out of the shower, towel around his waist, scrolling his phone with the arrogance of a man who thought money erased history. "We got that investor deal finalized today," he said casually. 35% stake, just like that. Things are finally aligning." Lydia turned, lips curling. "See? I told you leaving him was the best decision. Nathan's a nice guy, but he was slow, no ambition. Always playing safe." Dylan smirked. "Yeah, well, safe doesn't build empires." He didn't know the empire he was building already had a new king. Across the city, Nathan sat in a glass-walled office downtown. The logo on the frosted door read Raycrest Analytics. But no one, not even the board members, knew that name belonged to him. His partner, Clara Reyes, entered with a folder. The transfer is complete. Dylan Shaw just signed the equity deal. You own 35% of his company through Raycrest. Nathan leaned back slowly, a calm satisfaction crossing his face. Good. Now we wait. Don't touch anything. Just observe. By the end of the week, Dylan's company began noticing odd disruptions. Small accounting inconsistencies, a flagged tax record, one missing permit on a development property. Nothing big enough to panic over, just enough to keep their financial officer up at night. Lydia brushed off Dylan's frustration with her usual smug comfort. Relax. Every business hits snags. You're too tense. Let's go to Miami for the weekend. We deserve a break. But when they tried booking the trip, Dylan's corporate credit card was unexpectedly declined. The assistant's confused tone over the phone said it all. Sir, there's a temporary hold due to an internal audit. Probably nothing major. Lydia froze. An audit, she repeated. Dylan waved it off, pretending control, but sweat had already started forming beneath his collar. That night, as Lydia scrolled through social media, she stumbled on a headline that made her heart skip. Local tech visionary Nathan Cole partners with Raycrest Analytics in $60 million expansion. A photo showed Nathan at a gala, smiling in a tailored black suit beside a striking woman. Clara, elegant, confident, her hand resting lightly on Nathan's arm. Lydia's fingers tightened on her phone. Her throat went dry. He's working with them? She muttered. Dylan, glancing over, frowned. Who? She flipped the screen toward him. Dylan froze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The irony hit like a slap. The poor husband had not only survived, he was rising higher than ever, backed by a company indirectly entangled with Dylan's. He must have gotten lucky, Dylan said sharply, tossing the phone aside. You can't compare a tech bubble to real property. But his voice cracked just enough for Lydia to notice. Later that night, as Dylan slept beside her, Lydia sat awake, staring out the window. The city lights looked different now, colder, distant, almost mocking. For the first time, she wondered if she had miscalculated. She'd left a loyal man for a powerful one. But what if the loyal one had become the power? Meanwhile, across town, Nathan reviewed the audit files. Every move was in motion. Lydia and Dylan were dancing in a maze he had built. The IRS inquiry had been triggered quietly by an anonymous whistleblower complaint from an IP address routed through Raycrest's European division. Nathan poured himself a drink, his reflection calm in the glass. You wanted luxury, Lydia, he murmured softly. Let's see how much luxury you can afford when the walls start talking. The next morning, Dylan received an email from the IRS requesting full documentation of their firm's last 12 months of transactions, including rent reimbursements and personal transfers. The timing couldn't have been crueler. One of the transactions listed was the same account Lydia had once used to pay his apartment rent. When she saw the document, her face drained. Dylan, that's my name, my account. He turned to her, eyes sharp. What the hell did you do? For the first time, Lydia didn't have a lie ready. And somewhere in his downtown office, Nathan smiled faintly. The kind of smile that looked like peace but meant war. The next week came with more than whispers. It came with panic. Dylan's phone rang nonstop. Bankers, accountants, legal advisors, all wanting answers about the audit that had now spread from a routine check to a comprehensive financial review. Lydia watched from across the living room, her robe loose, her voice trembling as she asked the same question over and over. Can they take the company? Dylan's tone cracked between rage and fear. They can take everything if this gets classified as fraud. Do you understand? Everything. She swallowed hard, trying to sound composed. Then call your investors. Get ahead of it. He stared at her for a long second. They're not answering, Lydia. When she turned away, he slammed the papers on the table. This started the same month you were moving money for that damn apartment, didn't it? The air turned thick. Lydia's hands shook. I told you, that money was from your husband's account, Dylan snapped, voice rising. You stole from him, and now it's connected to my firm. Do you have any idea what kind of trail that leaves? Lydia's jaw quivered. Stop calling him my husband. Oh, trust me, Dylan hissed. The entire city's about to remember who he is. Across town, Nathan was preparing for the Raycrest Financial Forum, an exclusive event hosted for Atlanta's rising tech leaders. He stood before the mirror, adjusting the cufflinks Clara had gifted him, their silver glint matching the cool restraint in his eyes. "You ready?" Clara asked softly behind him. He smiled faintly. "I've been ready for months." The gala was held in a marble ballroom overlooking the skyline. Nathan's entrance turned heads. Not because he flaunted wealth, but because he radiated something rarer, power wrapped in calm. The once poor husband now stood under chandeliers that once seemed meant for other men. Reporters swarmed. Questions flew. "Mr. Cole, is it true Raycrest recently acquired a controlling interest in Shaw Real Estate Holdings?" Nathan looked directly into the camera and smiled. "We don't take control. We guide stability." The crowd laughed lightly, unaware that every word was a blade wrapped in silk. Lydia saw the coverage that same evening. The headline read, "Nathan Cole's Strategic Expansion Shakes Real Estate Sector." She muted the TV, her heart racing. Dylan was pacing the living room like a trapped animal. "He's behind this," Dylan muttered, his voice low and sharp. "He's the one who initiated that audit." Lydia's eyes widened. "That's impossible. He doesn't have that kind of reach." Dylan turned slowly toward her, his face hardening. "You don't know him anymore." That night, Lydia dreamed of the day she left Nathan, the way he'd stood by the door in silence. Signing the papers without argument, she'd mistaken that silence for weakness. But now she realized it wasn't surrender, it was strategy. By morning, another blow arrived. The IRS officially froze Dylan's corporate accounts pending investigation. Construction projects halted. Investors withdrew. Clients began canceling contracts, afraid of being tied to scandal. When Dylan's assistant quit midday, Lydia lost her composure completely. "How did this happen so fast?" she screamed, pacing the kitchen. "People don't lose everything overnight." Dylan slammed his hand on the counter. "He planned this, Lydia. He's been planning this since the day you left." And as if the universe agreed, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Hope you and Dylan are enjoying the penthouse. Luxury suits you. N." Her breath caught. She stared at the screen, her face pale. "He texted me," she whispered. Dylan snatched the phone, read the message, and hurled it across the room. "Don't respond," he said. "That's what he wants. He wants to see us panic." But Nathan didn't need to see them panic. He already knew they were. That evening, as Lydia scrolled through social media, she saw a video clip circulating. Nathan and Clara on stage at the gala, his arm around her waist, her engagement ring catching the spotlight. The caption read, "From heartbroken to headline, Nathan Cole announces engagement to tech partner Clara Reyes." Lydia's lips parted in disbelief. "He's getting married?" Dylan's silence was the only confirmation she needed. Meanwhile, in his downtown office, Nathan watched the same video replay silently on his monitor. The city outside glittered like a reward he didn't need. Clara walked in and handed him a glass of champagne. "You did it," she said softly. He took it but didn't drink. "No," he said, eyes still on the screen. "Not yet. This is just the overture." The reflection in the glass showed a man reborn. Calm, precise, dangerous in his restraint. For every wound they'd given him, he was building an answer. And soon those answers would echo louder than their laughter ever did. Atlanta's elite moved fast when they smelled scandal. One whisper at the Raycrest Gala turned into 100 murmurs by morning. By the time Lydia walked into her favorite salon in Buckhead, conversations froze. She could feel eyes following her through the mirror, smiles that looked polite but hid curiosity sharp enough to cut. "Lydia Shaw?" one stylist whispered to another. "Isn't that the woman whose husband—" Lydia stood abruptly, tossing her hair back with practiced grace. "Cancel the appointment," she said flatly, but her voice shook. For the first time, she didn't feel like the woman who left her boring husband for a better life. She felt like someone walking through a storm wearing glass heels. Across town, Dylan's office buzzed with chaos. Two of his investors had pulled out, citing financial integrity concerns. One of them forwarded him the article that started it all. Anonymous report exposes mismanagement at Shaw Real Estate. No name was attached to the author, but the evidence came from inside his own company. He called his accountant, shouting, "Who leaked this?" The accountant stammered through the phone. "Sir, the documents, they were traced back to a holding company, RC Analytics. That's part of the Raycrest network." Dylan froze. RC Analytics. Raycrest. Nathan. He slammed the phone down and whispered to himself, "He's everywhere." That evening, Lydia came home to find Dylan sitting in the dark, tie loosened, whiskey glass trembling in his hand. "We're done," he said flatly. She blinked. "What are you talking about?" "I mean, we're finished. They're freezing our assets. The banks pulled our line of credit. The house," he looked up at her, eyes red. "The house isn't ours anymore." Her jaw tightened. "You said it was paid off." "I lied," he snapped. "It was under the company's trust, and now it's under investigation. They'll take it all." Lydia sank onto the couch, disbelief turning to panic. "You can fix this, Dylan. You're smart. You always fix things." He gave a hollow laugh. "The man who could fix things is the man you left." Her throat burned. "Don't say that." But the truth was already circling them like smoke. 2 days later, Lydia attended a charity luncheon, desperate to reclaim normalcy. She wore pearls, her smile practiced. The cameras flashed, but the questions hit harder than any spotlight. "Mrs. Shaw, is it true your husband's firm is under federal audit? Is it connected to the recent Raycrest acquisition? Have you spoken with Nathan Cole since his engagement?" She forced a laugh and waved them off, but the tremor in her fingers betrayed her. Within hours, her photos were online, captions spinning faster than she could deny them. "From society darling to scandal wife," one blog headline read. "Nathan Cole's ex-facing karma in couture." When she returned home, Dylan was gone. His clothes, his laptop, everything. The silence in the penthouse felt final. That same night, Nathan attended an exclusive investors' dinner downtown. The chandeliers gleamed, conversations hushed when he entered. The host stood to introduce him. "Ladies and gentlemen, the man of the hour, Mr. Nathan Cole, founder of Raycrest Analytics." Applause rippled through the room. Cameras flashed. Nathan shook hands, calm and steady, as if his rise had been effortless. Only he knew the precision behind it, the patience of a man who had once been humiliated quietly and learned to strike silently. Midway through the dinner, a familiar voice startled him. "Nathan?" He turned. Lydia stood near the entrance, dressed in black, her eyes swollen but defiant. Security hesitated, unsure whether to stop her. The room went silent. "Nathan, please," she said softly, walking closer. "You've made your point." He looked at her with that same unflinching calm that used to scare her more than anger. "Have I?" "You're destroying us," she whispered. "You've taken everything." He leaned forward slightly, his tone even. "No, Lydia, I didn't take anything. I simply gave back what belonged to me. The truth." Her voice cracked. "I loved you once." He smiled faintly. "Then you should have stayed long enough to know who I'd become." She reached for his arm, but he stepped back. "Don't," he said quietly. "You don't get to touch the man you betrayed just to see if he still bleeds." Security escorted her out as cameras rolled, clicks echoing through the hall like judgment. When Nathan returned to his seat, Clara leaned close and whispered, "Are you all right?" He nodded slowly. "Perfectly." But his eyes followed Lydia through the glass doors until she disappeared into the night, small, lost, and finally aware of the power of silence. Outside, Lydia stumbled into the cold air, surrounded by flashing lights and whispers. For the first time, she realized that the elegant man inside wasn't the same Nathan she'd left behind. He wasn't seeking revenge anymore. He was writing an ending she could never rewrite. And somewhere behind the ballroom glass, Nathan lifted his glass toward the city lights. "For love," he murmured softly, "and for every lie that made it stronger." Dylan Shaw's office once smelled of cedar polish and quiet confidence. Now it smelled like panic. Papers littered the floor, half-packed boxes lined the walls. And the phones never stopped ringing. Reporters, creditors, attorneys. The man who'd built towers across Atlanta now sat beneath a single fluorescent light, sweat clinging to his collar as reality closed in. "Sir," his CFO said, voice trembling, "the state's revoked our development license until the audit is complete. Our lenders want immediate repayment. If we can't produce liquidity in 7 days..." Dylan cut him off. "Get out." When the door slammed, Dylan pressed his palms to his face. He'd spent years crafting an image, custom suits, luxury cars, magazine interviews. But now every article, every headline, every smiling photograph had turned into evidence. And the cruelest irony? The mysterious investor who owned 35% of his company was the same man whose wife he had stolen. Across the city, Nathan watched the news on silent. The ticker read, "Shaw Real Estate under investigation. Key projects frozen." Clara entered his office, setting a document on the desk. "It's official," she said softly. "Their assets are being seized. The holding companies are folding into our investment wing by default." Nathan scanned the paper. "And Lydia..." Clara hesitated. "She filed for divorce yesterday. Again." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "She always runs toward whoever looks like survival." He looked out the window, the skyline glittering below him like a kingdom reclaimed. But this time, there's nowhere left to run. That evening, Lydia arrived at Dylan's penthouse, empty, stripped of furniture, echoing like a museum of lost luxury. "Dylan," she called, her heels clicking against marble. No answer. She found him in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, packing boxes of old photos. "Where are you going?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Anywhere but here." "You can't just leave. We can fix this. We always fix things." Dylan turned slowly, eyes hollow. "You don't get it, do you? There's nothing to fix. He owns us. Every contract, every deal, every bank connection runs through his company. Even the lawyers are afraid to touch me." He laughed bitterly. "The man you called poor just bought the life we stole from him." Lydia's voice cracked. "Then talk to him. Apologize, maybe..." "Apologize?" Dylan stepped closer, his face inches from hers. "He's not after money. He's after balance. And balance doesn't negotiate." He shoved past her and walked out. The door slammed. Lydia stood frozen, surrounded by half-empty boxes and the echo of everything she'd chosen. Hours later, Nathan drove through the rain to the old neighborhood, the one where he and Lydia once lived before ambition corroded love. He parked across from their former house, now sold to strangers, and watched the porch light flicker in the drizzle. For a moment, the memory of simpler days pressed against his chest. The smell of pancakes, kids' laughter, Lydia humming in the kitchen. But memories, he realized, were like debts. They only mattered until they were paid. His phone buzzed. A message from his attorney. "Transfer complete. You now hold controlling interest in Shaw Real Estate assets. Dylan Shaw has filed for bankruptcy protection." Nathan exhaled slowly, closed his eyes, and whispered, "One debt cleared." By morning, the headlines hit every news feed. Shaw Real Estate declares bankruptcy. Ray Crest acquires assets in strategic takeover. The accompanying photo showed Nathan shaking hands with Atlanta's mayor, smiling politely. The caption beneath it read, "The comeback nobody saw coming." Lydia read it alone at a diner, makeup smudged, coffee untouched. Every word felt heavier than the last. People at nearby tables whispered her name. She pulled her coat tighter and stared at the newspaper until her vision blurred. Later that day, as Dylan's repossessed car was towed from the driveway, Lydia stood by the window and finally broke. Not loud, not theatrical, just quiet sobs against the glass. Meanwhile, Nathan sat in his penthouse office, the storm clouds clearing over downtown. Clara entered with 2 glasses of champagne. "To the next chapter?" she said. He nodded but didn't drink. "Not yet. There are still 2 pieces left." "Lydia and Dylan?" He looked out at the city, voice calm. "No. Lydia and the truth." The elevator dinged behind them. An assistant entered, holding a sealed envelope. "Mr. Cole, this came from your investigator. Said it's the last file you requested." Nathan opened it. Inside were printed screenshots. Lydia's old bank transfers, receipts, timestamps. Every betrayal quantified in numbers. He stared at the pages for a long moment, then set them on fire in the ashtray. The flames curled slow and bright. When Clara asked softly, "Why burn it?" he said, "Because revenge isn't complete when they suffer. It's complete when I don't care anymore." Outside, the wind shifted. Somewhere downtown, Lydia watched the same skyline from a cheap motel window, unaware that the man she thought she ruined had just erased the last trace of her name from his world. And in the quiet that followed, Nathan finally smiled. A small, elegant smile that held no hatred, only closure. A month passed, but time no longer moved the way it used to for Lydia. The world had gone silent around her. Calls unanswered. Friends who once filled her weekends with laughter now too busy. Her reflection in the motel mirror looked nothing like the woman who once floated through champagne dinners and gala nights. The pearls, the perfume, the practiced poise, all gone. What remained was raw, unpainted truth. Her phone buzzed with another decline notification from the bank. The last of her savings had gone to pay lawyers who never called back. She had tried to find Dylan, but his number was disconnected, his office emptied, his name already reduced to a footnote in business headlines. Rumors said he'd fled to Texas chasing a phantom investor. Others said he'd been arrested for falsified permits. Either way, she was alone. Across town, Nathan's life had moved forward with deliberate grace. The wedding was small, private, elegant. Just him, Clara, and a circle of genuine friends who had seen his transformation. The ceremony was held in a glass garden overlooking the skyline. When he looked into Clara's eyes as they exchanged vows, it wasn't triumph he felt, it was peace. Peace built from precision, not pride. Later at the reception, an older guest from the finance world raised a toast. "To new beginnings," he said. Nathan smiled politely, but when the room clapped, his mind drifted to the woman who had once called him average. For the first time, he realized he no longer hated her. Hatred required energy. She no longer had any power left to take. Meanwhile, Lydia found a job at a downtown diner, waiting tables for people who didn't recognize her name. She told herself it was temporary, that she'd rebuild. But every day she carried plates to laughing couples, she saw fragments of her old life reflected in their small moments. The kind of life she once threw away for something shinier. And every time she looked out the window at the skyline, she saw the logo of Raycrest glowing from a tower in the distance, like a reminder carved into the night. One evening, she came home to a letter slipped under her motel door. The envelope bore no return address. Her name was written in familiar, precise handwriting. Hands trembling, she opened it. "Lydia, some debts don't need payment, just acknowledgement. You once told me I'd never be enough. You were right. I became more than enough. There's a check enclosed. Use it however you need. It's not forgiveness. It's closure." Nathan inside was a single check, $50,000 drawn from Raycrest Holdings. Lydia stared at it for a long time, her mind spinning through disbelief, pride, and shame. He wasn't buying her silence. He was proving he no longer needed revenge. And somehow that hurt more than anything he'd done before. She folded the check back into the envelope and sat on the bed until dawn, tears she hadn't allowed in months finally breaking through. In that moment, she realized what true poverty was. It wasn't about money. It was about the absence of worth when the person who once saw value in you no longer did. Nathan, meanwhile, stood on his balcony, watching the first light spill over Atlanta. Clara joined him, her head resting against his shoulder. "It's over," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "For me, yes." Then he looked out at the city that had once humiliated him and now carried his name on glass towers, and said quietly, "But for them, it's just beginning." Because he knew what Lydia didn't yet realize. Dylan's forged signatures and Lydia's financial transfers had been reopened under federal investigation. The same evidence she thought had burned away months ago had been forwarded anonymously to the Department of Revenue. By the next week, Dylan's name resurfaced in headlines again. Federal charges filed against former developer and associates. Lydia's phone rang with a number she hadn't seen in months. When she answered, a voice from the district attorney's office asked, "Mrs. Shaw, were you aware of your participation in these transfers?" The world seemed to tilt. "No," she whispered, gripping the counter. "Please, I didn't know." But the investigator's tone was indifferent. You'll need to come in for questioning." When the line went dead, Lydia sank to the floor, her hands shaking. She looked again toward the skyline through the thin motel curtains. The Raycrest logo shimmered faintly in the distance. Beautiful, unreachable, and final. Across that same skyline, Nathan closed his laptop, having read the morning's headlines. He poured coffee, his expression unreadable. When Clara asked, "Does it ever feel like too much?" he smiled faintly. "No," he said softly. "It feels like balance." And as the sun rose over Atlanta, both of them, one rebuilt, one ruined, finally understood the same thing in two different ways. Betrayal doesn't destroy people. It reveals who they truly are when the curtain falls. The courthouse smelled of coffee and fear. Lydia sat on the wooden bench outside the hearing room, palms slick, eyes darting to the clock every few seconds. Her lawyer, young, tired, already defeated, whispered, "Just answer honestly, Mrs. Shaw. They only want clarification." Clarification. That word felt cruel. She wanted erasure. When they finally called her name, the hallway seemed to stretch forever. She stepped into a room filled with gray suits and calm voices. The prosecutor read through bank records, receipts, and wire transfers. Every page carried her handwriting. Every signature looked like confession. "So you confirm," the prosecutor said evenly, "these transfers were made from a joint account once shared with Mr. Nathan Cole, funds later deposited into Dylan Shaw's corporate accounts?" Lydia's voice cracked. "Yes, but I didn't know they were illegal. I thought it was rent. The prosecutor raised a hand. "We're not here to discuss your intentions, Mrs. Shaw. Just the facts." The facts, those same facts Nathan had once lived quietly beneath, now stood tall, wearing suits and holding evidence. Every word pinned her down. Afterwards, she stepped into the daylight, cameras flashing. Reporters shouted her name, their questions slicing through the noise. "Mrs. Shaw, is it true your ex-husband exposed the fraud? Did you know the children weren't his? How does it feel to watch him succeed?" She pushed through the crowd, eyes burning. She didn't answer. She couldn't. For the first time, silence wasn't power. It was survival. Across the city, Nathan sat for a television interview. The studio lights glowed warm against his face as the host leaned in. "Mr. Cole, your company's growth has been extraordinary. Some say your story, losing everything and rebuilding, is a symbol of second chances. What drives you?" Nathan paused, choosing every word with surgical calm. "Sometimes," he said, "people think success is revenge. It isn't. Success is silence after noise. It's peace after chaos." The host smiled. "Beautifully said. And if those who wronged you were watching tonight?" Nathan's gaze didn't waver. "Then I hope they're listening, not watching. Watching means they still care. Listening means they've learned." The broadcast went viral by midnight. Comments flooded social media. Praise, admiration, disbelief. Nathan Cole became the emblem of grace under betrayal. Lydia watched it alone on the motel TV, tears running soundless. She whispered to the screen, "You win, Nathan." But even she knew it wasn't about winning anymore. It was about endings. The next morning she was summoned again, this time not to testify, but to settle. Dylan's plea deal named her as a participant in 2 transactions, but the prosecution offered leniency in exchange for cooperation. She signed the papers, hands trembling. The signature looked smaller than it used to. When she left the building, the sky broke open with soft rain. She didn't run. She let it soak her hair, her clothes, her pride, everything. For the first time, she felt clean. Later that evening, Nathan attended a charity fundraiser for underprivileged students. He stood at the podium, looking over a crowd that now adored him for the same humility they once mocked. "We all build something," he said. "Some build empires, some build excuses. I built another chance." Applause filled the room, but his eyes drifted to the back where a woman stood quietly near the exit, watching. Lydia. She looked older, smaller, but her eyes still carried that defiant spark. Their gazes met for the first time in a year. She didn't speak. She just mouthed, "I'm sorry." Nathan gave a small nod. No anger, no triumph, just closure. and turned back to finish his speech. When he stepped off the stage, she was gone. Outside, rain pooled under the streetlights, washing away her footprints before anyone could see them. Back in his car, Nathan sat in silence for a moment, then whispered, "Now it's over." But deep down, he knew endings never truly end. They simply fade when the heart stops remembering. The rain hadn't stopped for days. Atlanta looked blurred, streets glazed in silver, neon bleeding across puddles. Lydia walked with her coat pulled tight, one hand clutching the last envelope from her lawyer. It wasn't a summons this time. It was the final settlement notice. The government had accepted her cooperation. Her record would be cleared. Freedom on paper. But paper didn't feel like freedom. Paper felt like ash. She stopped outside a storefront window and saw her reflection framed between two mannequins wearing the same designer brand she used to model on social media. For a moment, she imagined the woman she used to be, heels clicking across marble floors, laughter echoing through penthouses. Then she remembered the sound of Dylan's voice the day the police took him away, the way he'd refused to look at her. "You destroyed both of us," he'd said before the elevator doors closed. Maybe he was right. Or maybe the destruction had been mutual from the beginning. Across town, Nathan was in a boardroom on the 48th floor, signing the last acquisition papers that absorbed what remained of Dylan's former company. His team congratulated him. Clara kissed him lightly on the cheek. He smiled, but there was no victory in it, just release. "Make sure the affordable housing project goes through," he said quietly. "Every property we reclaimed, convert them into something that helps people. That's how we close this." That evening, a delivery arrived at Lydia's motel. A small parcel, no return address, just her name typed neatly. Inside was a folded newspaper article, Nathan's latest interview, and a plain silver key. Beneath the key was a note. "There's a small house on Maple Street. It used to be ours. It's yours again. No conditions, no cameras, no press. Consider it an apology for the years I let you believe I was weak. N." She stared at the key for a long time before driving out to Maple Street. The house sat quietly behind a picket fence, lights dim, yard overgrown. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and memory. The same window seat where she once folded laundry was still there. The same wall where Mason had drawn crayon rockets still bore faint traces of color. She sat down and cried until her voice went hoarse. Not because of guilt, but because of the unbearable gentleness of the gesture. When dawn came, Nathan stood on his balcony miles away, watching the sunrise wash over the city. Clara brought him coffee and set it beside him. "You finally let it go?" she asked. He nodded. "I didn't forgive her. I just stopped carrying her." Down on Maple Street, Lydia opened the front door to the morning light. The world outside smelled like rain and second chances, but she knew this wasn't a beginning. It was what remained after everything else burned away. She whispered his name once, quietly, almost like prayer. Then she started cleaning the house, one room at a time, because sometimes redemption isn't dramatic. It's domestic. It's sweeping the dust off the floor of the life you ruin. Nathan, miles away, looked out over the skyline one last time. "Balance," he said softly and turned from the window. The elegant move was complete. Not the wealth, not the takeover, not the exposure. The true move was giving her peace he no longer needed, leaving her alive with memory instead of hatred. That was the kind of revenge that didn't fade. That was the kind that lasted forever. Autumn drifted across Atlanta with that faint gold haze that makes the city look cleaner than it really is. Nathan stepped out of the black sedan parked in front of the new Raycrest Foundation building. Cameras waited, but this time they weren't hunting scandal. They were covering the launch of his housing initiative, one designed to turn foreclosed developments into affordable homes. He walked the press line calmly, shaking hands, answering questions with practiced warmth. Every movement felt lighter now, stripped of the weight that used to drive him. Inside, he cut the ribbon while Clara stood beside him, the crowd applauding. A reporter called out, "Mr. Cole, what inspired this project?" He smiled gently. "A reminder that rebuilding isn't about walls, it's about people. Every story deserves a second draft." Later, in his office overlooking the skyline, he signed the last document, placed his pen down, and exhaled. Clara watched him for a moment before asking, "So what now?" He looked out at the glass towers, their reflections catching the orange evening light. "Now we live," he said. "No more ghosts." Across town, Lydia was sweeping the front porch of the little house on Maple Street. The yard had begun to bloom again. She'd planted marigolds where weeds once grew. The air smelled of rain and cut grass. She had found a small bookkeeping job at a neighborhood clinic, modest but steady. Every paycheck felt like proof that she still existed. Sometimes she'd see Nathan's face on television, talking about technology or charity, and her chest would ache, not from envy anymore, but from recognition. The man she once belittled had become everything she pretended to want, and he had done it without needing her to see it. That evening she stood by the window, holding a cup of coffee, watching headlights slide past. On the kitchen counter lay the envelope he'd sent, the key, the note, and the check she never cashed. She kept them as a kind of scripture, the only evidence that mercy can hurt more than vengeance. Far above the city, Nathan poured 2 glasses of wine on the balcony. Clara joined him, her laughter soft against the wind. "You're smiling," she said. "That's new." He nodded. "It's strange. The world looks the same, but it feels different when you stop fighting ghosts." Down on Maple Street, Lydia stepped outside. The night air carried the distant hum of traffic, and faintly, the city lights where his tower gleamed. She whispered into the dark, "Thank you for letting me start over." No one heard her, but somewhere, across the skyline, Nathan looked up as if he had. The rain began again, gentle this time, washing the streets clean. 2 lives moved in opposite directions, one finally rising, one finally still, but for the first time neither carried the other's shadow. And that was the end of the elegant move. Not the destruction of those who betrayed him, but the quiet art of walking away whole.